Welcome to the Left Hemispheres podcast. I'm Jack. With me, as always, is Steve.
Hello, everyone.
And Nick.
Hello.
And Adam couldn't make it this week, so he's taking the week off. As always, please.
That was sincere. I like Adam. That was sincere.
As always, please direct questions, comments, suggestions, etc. to lefthemispheres@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Google+, Twitter @lefthemispheres. Also, if you listen to us on iTunes, please go ahead and subscribe. And if you are subscribed, please go ahead and rate and comment, because that really helps us out. If you don't listen to us on iTunes, see the show notes, and you can get the RSS feed under the Libsyn link. Oh, also, just so everybody knows, next episode is going to be a little early, because we have to record it early, because I have to catch a plane when we normally record. So, just so you know.
And then we should have a clip show after that.
Yeah, there's going to be like a gag reel show, basically. That's what we're going to do.
And it's not all gag. I mean, some of it's highlights and gags, right?
Yeah, it's a clip show.
It's a clip show.
Yeah.
All right, the swear jar tally from last episode 14. Last episode, Adam had 3, so that's $3. Jack had 8. Nick had 7, and I had 14.
Wow.
You know, that's extremely low for Nick and I. That has been my average ever since, really, the first 2 after the past 3 episodes. I've been in the 14, 15 range. Nick missed an episode, so he went from 31 to 7.
It's just because he missed an episode. He needs to warm up again.
Yeah. You were off your game.
Fuck.
There you go. Keep that in there, Jack. After this episode, we got one more. Actually, it'll work out perfectly right before the clip show. Will be the end of the first quarter. There's this episode, and then the next episode that we'll record before Jack hits Oz. And then at that point, we will tally. Right now, we're at 281 plus 50, so... whatever we have in the next 2 episodes, we're going to have a good sizable chunk of change to donate here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is an article from therationalist.org UK, written by Casper Melville, Facing the Future, an interview with Jim Al-Khalili, who is now the president of the British Humanist Association. It's basically a background interview piece about, what Al-Khalili is about. And it's pretty interesting. It has a lot of things in here I think that will give a lot of atheists and humanists some pause. I think it's a different direction for the British Humanist Association, of which I am surprisingly not part of.
Why wouldn't you be?
I'm just kidding, because I'm not British.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, our forefathers fought and died for us to not have to agree with the British. So that's the way I feel every time, like something happens, like the prince gets married or the queen has a coronation and all of America flips out. And I'm just like, that's disrespectful.
Yeah. We're not supposed to care.
Yeah, we fought for the right not to care.
Fought and died not to give a fuck about those blue blood sons of bitches.
Exactly. That's how I feel about it. Fuck them.
Damn it. I just did a $10 word.
And it rises. So anyway, there's a lot of things to comment on, depending on how much we want to. That's why I put this first. We'll take it as it comes. But I think the biggest thing that's going to give a lot of atheists and humanists in Britain and here in the States and across the world is, because they're an influential group, is that says he's an accommodationist, the quote unquote, it's the dirty word in our realm, He believes that a softer approach is required, and quote, my view is that if you focus on what's bad about religion, that doesn't serve any purpose. For a lot of people, religion is vitally important. It creates social cohesion in communities and offers comfort. And as long as it doesn't affect me or offend me, it's fine. Get on with it.
Well, but that's the key part there is affect me or offend me.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of stuff about religion that offends me.
And affects.
Well, especially in Britain. I mean, Church of England. What the fuck? He pays taxes to that shit.
Right. So, therefore, it's affecting him. Every time a local school board has to expend any amount of time or money because people are trying to push creationism slash ID in schools, or remove books that they find questionable because of their religious beliefs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then it's affecting me and others.
It affects others with discrimination against same-sex marriage and homosexuals in general, transgender people. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's a narrow spectrum to look at everything and say, as long as it doesn't affect me, it's fine. That
said Neville Chamberlain.
Yeah. Why don't you just give them the Sudetenland, why don't you?
There's people that can't stand up for themselves. They're called children. That they don't have a choice what they're indoctrinated into. And, we can sit here, and I don't want to get into the argument of parents' rights and what they're allowed to teach their children, because that's a whole other ball of wax. But my point being is things that are, it's the same situation here in the States. Not exactly in my area, but in other areas where I've lived. If I lived in the South still and was raising my kid and she was going to public school, but they were teaching creationist garbage there, that affects me. And that affects the kids in that class. Not all of the parents may have which agree with it. And you stand up against that, and then you're considered the outsider. It's just a very narrow view of the reality of what religion does. It adversely affects everyone for the most part. We don't even need to sit here and go through examples.
Well, I mean, that type of thinking, it spreads beyond established lines of religion, into astrology and homeopathy, and that type of thinking, which is not evidence based.
Right.
And as long as you have these monoliths, then you're going to have these little piles of rubble that are ridiculousness.
Well,
around them.
I think the little piles of rubble of ridiculousness everyone is willing to put up with,
No,
because,
I'm not.
Well, no,
because I think they're just as dangerous.
But they're
Jack, I think you need to elaborate.
Well, you've got somebody who has whatever woo-woo idea. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't affect anybody but them, fuck it, I don't care, right?
But things like that almost never just affect them, because, they might have children, or...
well, okay, not to be harsh, but their children aren't my problem.
Those kids grow up to be idiots.
I'll be dead by then.
You don't know that. And,
if I'm not dead by then, I'm robotic and diseases won't hurt me.
I'm just going to ignore that. From an evolutionary standpoint, and not like the cold-blooded evolutionary, like, progeny. But, I don't want my kid and my kin and my friends' kids, and it just keeps expanding, to have to grow up fighting the same idiotic battles over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to keep doing this? Are we really that stupid of a species that we're just going to be this circular? I don't believe we are. I believe we're winning. It's just a very slow and methodical battle. And to sit here and say that the softer approach is required, whatever people believe on their own is okay, if the thing is like, if that were only true, because as we're discussing here, it's never confined to the individual. It's impossible for any of the Abrahamic religions to be confined, their faith to be confined to the individual. It, by necessity, has to spread, because it is not... They talk about how it's based on revelation, but that's bullshit. It's not on revelation, it's based on indoctrination. There is no revelation, except for the purely delusional. They believe in revelation. But the majority of Christians in America, at least, which I still believe the majority of Christians are actually the moderate to liberal kind. They're just too, Jesus meek and mild to stand up to anybody about anything. They've got that relativist bent. We're all raised in at least a partially, or not raised, but exposed, some of us more than others. I was raised to be a Christian. And that's the entire point.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. I mean, when you say the majority of Christians don't believe in that idea, right? I mean, the most recent Gallup poll was 46% of Americans believe in creationism. 54% in the majority who don't believe in creationism, but that still puts the majority of Christians in that 46 camp because 25 or 15% are nuns, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You see where I'm going with that?
Yes, I do. Now, is that 46% the strict creationism,
or is it
like 6,000 years old?
It was 10,000 years or less.
46% were 10,000 years or less?
Yes.
All right, I'm screw it. I'm out. I'm just going to go cut myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's much worse than you thought it was.
I give people too much credit. Okay, so my last
I've met atheists that don't believe in evolution.
Yeah, I have one or two. Those are the hyper skeptics,
right? And
those tend to be like the wackos, the Ron Paul InfoWars type people.
No, those are just people who are Descartes arguing for the sake of argument, and it's kind of like, how do we know that everything wasn't created when I was born and it's the year 33? Fuck you.
Yeah, the postmodernist dipshit.
Yeah, that guy. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck him. They're irrelevant. That's the militant agnostic right there.
We can't know anything.
Okay, so my last point, moot. You guys destroyed that. Fine. But the point that I was building is that religion is not going anywhere without a fight. We cannot ignore anything because by nature it has to itself spread. By ignoring what is wrong with religion and being nice, the softer approach, we just invite the continuation of all these practices and beliefs without any kind of buffer. I mean, this is where we've been up until recently. These idiotic beliefs, the doctrine, they don't go away on their own. It's a human cultural construct, and so it's constantly evolving.
Right.
However, it's evolved itself to be really resistant to change, especially internally. So most of the change has been due to the external forces, such as, the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, the advent of secular government and the scientific method. These are the things that have secularized Christianity in the West,
right,
and gotten rid of a lot of the old nonsense. There's still plenty to go, but these things are going to change on their own. They just don't. They're not exactly static, but they are extraordinarily resistant to change, except through external forces, which is us.
If you look at the bulls and missives and things that were coming out of the Catholic Church in the late 19th century, they still decried, representative government, any kind of democratic government as being evil, and that monarchy was the only form of government favored by God, the only one that was in keeping with the church. Scientific method, scientific research in the 19th century was not accepted at all.
It's funny because now they sit there and parrot democratic ideals,
right?
Because it's become the norm in the West.
John Paul II, was all pro-democracy, and because that was the side to be on, as opposed to the communists.
Yeah, exactly.
It's whatever is advantageous to maintaining their power.
Right, but due to because of
you even heard that in Ratzinger's going away speech, where he was like, I want to do what's best for the church, and all that matters is doing good for the church. And you're just like, that's a very company man attitude, which I am not one for.
Right.
What's good for the brand?
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much what the Catholic Church amounts to. It's a brand that sells nothing. It is the ultimate business when you think about it.
One of my favorite quotes, I just posted it on the Left Hemispheres Facebook page this past week, was something to the effect of, they want to sell you heaven so they can steal this world, which is what the Catholic Church is the embodiment of that. I mean, all religions are, but the Catholic Church especially. I mean, to be a Catholic, you really do have to shut your brain down. The doctrine of the Church to, in one hand, tell poor and moderately wealthy people to give up worldly possessions to get to heaven while sitting in the Vatican. This is cliche.
Throne.
This is cliche. This isn't. We're not breaking any new ground here. I mean, I cannot fathom how anybody can sit there.
They just accept the premise, right?
Jeez, look at us. We're going right after the Catholic Church again. We're just slipping right back into that.
All right, so let's get back to this, Jim.
Yeah.
Well, I think, this atheist church planning link that Nick posted does kind of demonstrate where he's coming from with this entire opinion, though. I mean, because, it's the British, and if that kind of, atheist church thing is catching on there, then you can almost see how the British Humanist Association would start to think of things in that way.
Right. He says, and I quote, "I would say that's because we are winning the battle that we can afford not to be so strident, belligerent, antagonistic, confrontational. Because we're winning the battle."
I think that is entirely premature.
I think it is.
A few steps forward in the West doesn't mean you're winning the battle. That is a very myopic fucking view.
Again,
take a look at Africa, my friends. Take a look at Africa and tell me we're winning the fucking battle. I think not.
Well, and this is what I'm saying. We said this last time about that piece that Andy wrote about, and that guy who wrote the piece that atheists will take over by 2038. It's just a huge number of assumptions. And then what Nick just said is myopic, and what I was saying earlier is it's looking at one color in the spectrum.
Right.
It's not. There's no broad view here. It's very myopic to the Western experience and the British experience. Because it's not the same here.
Oh, no.
It's not the same in Puerto Rico, as we'll get to later. It's not the same in the American military, which we'll also get to later. It's a completely myopic and narrow spectrum view to say that we are winning the battle. That has nothing to do with the war. And, now I'll say this. I think that we do need people to not be strident, belligerent, antagonistic, confrontational.
Right.
But we also need people to also be strident, belligerent, antagonistic. I am.
Well, what we need to be is assertive as opposed to aggressive.
Yeah.
We can't afford to be passive.
No.
And we cannot be aggressive. We need to be assertive.
But whose definition of aggressive? Whose definition is strident, belligerence, antagonism, and confrontational? Me saying the Bible is false is considered strident, belligerent, antagonistic, and confrontational.
But it's not.
Exactly. It's a statement of fact.
Well, that's just it. Right. Whose definition are you going to use for that?
So therefore, I ignore the entire argument. Because everybody has their own definition of what level. I have my own definition of that. And no, I'm not going to get in someone's face and spit at them and be hateful. But when the subject comes up and they want to start talking to me about fucking morality, and I say, no, I posted something on Facebook on my personal account today about the 10 Commandments. Right? I wasn't even, the thing was, that was pretty fucking mild. Nobody really had a problem with it, but I know, there's people that are like, it would take major offense to that, probably not that long ago. People at this point probably just hid me. But if I were to go to, a public place and start talking about that kind of thing, you could just only imagine the reaction, as public preachers, you know what I mean?
I think if you have to draw a line on where being belligerent and being assertive is, I mean, think Hitchens and not Ernest Pierce, and you're pretty much headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
If you aim for that, that's about right.
So to bring it back to the article, the other portion of this is Al-Khalili's working definition of humanism, which is, quote, "It means I think that humankind's fate and future is in its own hands. The reason why we strive for a better world and to be good is not because of some old scripture or mythology tells me that I'll be rewarded if I'm good and punished or if I'm bad, but because being good defines me as human. Anyone who wants to be good because they think they should be, not because their religion tells them to be, for me, is a humanist. And with that, I generally agree.
Mm-hmm.
The definition of humanism. Actually, Martin Pribble just 1 or 2 days ago posted something about humanism, and he used a definition that was pretty basic, and then was talking about other people's, the warping the concept of humanism to be about human comfort, and therefore it leads to hedonism. And I don't even see where they get that jump.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a big jump.
It's basically them projecting their idea of the other onto us, whereas everybody who isn't Christian is therefore sinful, because the whole concept of sin retards the mind.
Right.
And
well, that's a lot of what I hear is that humanism. So you worship human beings. You're replacing you're replacing God with
I've heard that
people.
one.
Oh yeah,
and it's like, no, I don't worship human. I don't find anything in humanity to worship. But there are things in humanity to admire, and there are things in humanity
not to admire.
Not right. I mean, it's. I mean, I think if you're a humanist, that means that you realize the strengths and weaknesses of
I think
human beings and of yourself, and and you're trying to overcome those weaknesses, and reinforce those strengths.
I always think of it as terms of I always think of humanism in terms of the natural progression of any kind of civil rights action, right? Like it kind of branches. It's like feminism, and then you expand that out to include dudes, and you get humanism. I mean,
well, yeah, I have said that in the past, that I don't refer to myself as a feminist because I consider myself a humanist, and I think it subsumes it.
Yeah.
However, I agree with most equality feminists.
Oh no, exactly.
I mean, it's included within the humanist, concept of we're all equal, and we all have a right to exist free, and we can go off on that entire tangent, but it's all subsumed by humanism. You know what it is? I mean, it's just it's basically, I view this as, from my anthropological background, it's the theists, and this is less of an insult as it will come off. It's the theist inability to view things outside of how they perceive. Their view of the world is that you have to worship something.
Right.
So, therefore, if you don't worship God, you're worshiping something, whether it's Satan or some other gods or nature. Yeah. Like, they think environmentalists worship nature, and they think humanists worship humans. Right. It's an absurdity, but it makes sense from their perspective, because they think there's something there that has to be worshipped. There has to be something that is what you focus everything on in a supernatural way, almost. It's just an artifact of the way they think.
And part of it is because they don't put a whole lot of thought on it, and they just take it as superficial, right? They hear humanist, and they say, well, okay, that's humanist, and we're Christians, and the Muslims obviously worship Muz.
And the Hindus. I know it sounds crazy, but they just don't get it. They don't get the dichotomy of, while I don't put anything above myself to worship, doesn't mean that I put myself or humanity at the apex.
Which is, that's interesting. That they completely miss that. They understand the part where, we're not putting anything above ourselves and worshiping it, but they completely miss the part where we're a minuscule little speck on a tiny little piece of rock in the middle of
nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, our worldview is kind of, we're very, very, very teeny tiny, and they're very lonely.
This is when we cue the song from
Animaniacs.
No, The Meaning of Life.
That's kind of the same song.
It is kind of the same song.
first, to set fire to their synagogues or schools, and to bury and cover with dirt whatever will not burn, so that no man will ever see a stone or cinder of them. This is to be done in honor of our Lord and of Christendom, so that God might see that we are Christians, and do not condone or knowingly tolerate such public lying, cursing, and blaspheming of his Son and of his Christians. By the esteemed Martin Luther, from his 1543 classic book, The Jews and Their Lies. Today's Laughing in Purgatory segment is brought to you by Martin Luther's Collectible Plates. Made by the prestigious Franklin Mint, these 12 collectible plates show Martin Luther torching synagogues, burning Jewish homes, and other Christ-centered activities. Order yours today. Welcome, you godless sons and daughters of reason. Welcome those who would color outside the lines of the coloring book of superstition. This is Andrew Hall. This is the Laughing in Purgatory section of the Left Hemispheres podcast. Let's do this thing. You know what I'm getting sick and tired of? I'm getting sick and tired of Christians treating the Ten Commandments like they were sacred or something, right? I mean, they expect the Ten Commandments to protect their kids in school. They think that somehow the Ten Commandments put up in courthouses is going to somehow make more people go to jail, maybe. Maybe that's what they're thinking about. I say that the real problem with the Ten Commandments isn't the fact that they're not in schools or that they're not up on courthouses. No, I say that Christians are not dealing with the full 613 commandments that are in the Old Testament. Christians only follow 10, and to tell you the truth, those 10, they don't follow that well either. Now, a lot of Christians may say, well, you know, Jesus Christ is the new covenant, and we don't need to follow all those 600 and something, laws in the Old Testament. Well, let's hear what Jesus Christ had to say. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And there's a lot of fucking blah, blah, blah after that. You can find that, maybe without the blah, 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 in Matthew 5, 17, 19. So this is what I say with the 613 commandments. I say we throw up all 613 Old Testament commandments in every school, every courthouse, and every Chick-fil-A, and make Christians answer for each and every one of them. For example, did you know that one of God's commandments for you are to wear special tassels on your clothing? That's right. One of them is that you got to have these special tassels on the corners of your clothing. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations to come, you're to make tassels on the corners of your garments, with a blue cord on each tassel, from Numbers 15:38. How about this one? How about this classic one that a lot of Christians don't want to let you know about? Jews, do not intermarry with Gentiles. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons. That's Deuteronomy 7:3. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Andy, you're giving these Christians a lot of trouble. You're giving them a lot of trouble because you're tearing down their commandments. You're tearing down their rules. What kind of rules would you say? What if you were going to make commandments? What kind of commandments would you do? Well, I will tell you this, my friend. That is a false premise of a question that you offer me, because I wouldn't make any commandments. I would make a very simple observation, and these might be like 10 observations, but I'm just going to tell you what my first observation is. Our species has a horrible gob of a brain. That thinky thing that sits on top of your shoulders is a tank of bad data processing. Its default setting is absurdly aggressive stupidity. The only reason why you think your brain is so good is that, 1, everyone else's brain around you are in fact worse than yours. 2, your brain is so bad that it can't judge how bad it is. And that's a real thing. That's a scientific phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect. To wit, Let us look at the definition. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychological effect in which people misunderstand their level of knowledge on a subject. People who know little about the subject think that they know more than they actually know. People who know a lot about the subject think that they know less than they do. In other words, the severely incompetent don't know that they are severely incompetent because they are severely incompetent. There. I hope we all feel a little bit better now that we've gone over how fucking stupid our species is. This has been the Laughing in Purgatory section of the Left Hemispheres podcast. I'll catch you next time.
So there's a second half to this article here. I don't know how much you guys want to touch on it. We can run through it real quick and see if we want to include it. Because I think it was interesting. There's like this juxtaposition here with Al-Khalili between his ideas on humanism and being nice, and then suddenly he becomes a very non-relativistic person when it comes to science. I don't know if you guys read the entire article, but basically he's like, and I'll use a quote again, a lot of people say science is just one way of looking at the world, at reality, and poets and musicians, and of course people of faith have said there are other ways. I don't buy that. For me, there is an objective reality that is there and real. And he goes on to continue, I have an ontological view. There's an ultimate truth, and we're trying to get as close to it as possible. We don't know how far away we are, but we think we're converging on it slowly. It goes on.
Yeah, that's like the doctor at the asylum saying, well, there is no way that you're Napoleon, but I'm going to work with you, Mr. Bonaparte. I completely reject your conjecture that you are the Emperor of France. However, I'm going to allow you to live in that delusion. If you want to overstep your bounds, then that's okay. Because that's part of who you are as Emperor, which is how religion sees itself.
All right, let's move on. I think we're done here. Let's move on because we have a lot to cover here. Yeah. And this is one I know Adam was personally upset that he couldn't be here for this conversation.
So the Freedom from Religion Foundation is starting an action alert to oppose congressional storm aid for religious institutions.
Which got passed, I believe.
The congressional storm aid did?
Yes.
So this is over and done with now?
Well, I mean, it might have been. I think it might have passed the House, but maybe it hasn't passed the Senate yet.
Oh, okay.
It's talking here about HR. So that's House Resolution 592.
Okay.
I think it's passed the House, but it has to pass the.
But they're saying it needs to contact. Yeah.
It will.
It will, because no one's gonna not vote for storm relief.
Yeah.
It's a storm relief bill, right? I mean, it's not just religion. It's just religion is part of the bill, right? Like fixing churches or whatever is in the bill somewhere, and there's all kinds of other stuff there too, right?
Well, they had already passed the bill to provide aid for disaster relief, for Sandy and everything like that. But churches and synagogues and other religious buildings are exempt from that. Because
I think this is strictly for religious institutions.
This resolution is basically to amend. It's basically to bypass. Yeah. I don't know if they have it here or not. Well, they go into the Supreme Court decisions that say that that disaster relief.
Tilton versus Richardson.
Yeah.
All right. So it's established that disaster relief doesn't. Well, okay, that's a fair.
It's not exactly. I should interject. It's not exactly that it's established that emergency money can't go to religious institutions. It's established via Tilton versus Richardson in 1971 that the state may not erect buildings in which religious activities are to take place, and it may not maintain such buildings or renovate them when they fall into disrepair.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's also versus something else, public education and religious liberty versus Nyquist in 1973.
Right. Which basically it would prevent the government from giving emergency aid or rebuilding money during a disaster or after a disaster to rebuild religious buildings that have been damaged by the storm. Yeah, which, if you're already a tax exempt, organization, then you can't squirrel some money away.
Yeah, and really that makes sense. I mean, look, by not paying taxes, you're not putting faith in the government, which is what your prayer is for, and it obviously didn't work. So,
which is a line in this.
It's on you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the Hurricane Sandy, ironically, a so-called act of God, which did not spare houses of worship.
Right.
Yeah, it seems to me that if it's called an act of God and God tears the church down, then God doesn't want it there, and you should shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
it just seems reasonable.
I think the three of us are on the same page, and it's unfortunate that Adam's not here because I think he was not so much in the favor of it, but just he was the most.
Well, he was talking about how churches are social centers and whatnot,
which I disagree.
I disagree.
Well,
with that premise.
I mean, right? I mean, they churches become like focal points for disaster relief and stuff like that because they're good at a groupthink. They have an established crowd and that people already run to when they're scared. Whether that threat is real or not. So in the event of a real disaster, those same people run there.
Now, okay, see, here's the thing. I would be willing to make an exception if the church or religious building also serves as a emergency shelter. That makes sense? Like, I mean, if it does serve a public function as an emergency shelter.
If it was constructed in such a manner.
Yeah.
To actually withstand.
Although then it probably wouldn't need the relief money.
I was just going to say that.
Now, the real tragedy of this is that, Congress had passed, to provide $60 billion for recovery efforts. Now, this resolution does not change that $60 billion. But it's going to redirect money.
It'll reallocate religious institutions.
That's right. So instead of people's houses being rebuilt,
right,
or infrastructure being rebuilt, now we're
going to give money to an already tax-exempt institution.
Right. Right. Smiling glad hands will be able to pass around the collection plate without the rain dripping on them.
And as the FFRS points out, the Catholic Church already owns $3.5 billion worth of property in New York City alone.
I really don't understand how. This is one of those things that has always kind of bugged me. It seems to me that if we're going to take this whole church tax exempt thing seriously, then the correct way to handle the Catholic Church is to say that each church is Vatican territory and it has nothing to do with the U.S. And if they want disaster relief, they have to call Rome.
Yeah. Well, that's
the double standard of their diplomatic immunity or whatever.
Yeah,
or
their religion statehood. And their estate and whatever. It's all fucking stupid.
Yeah, I oppose this. Shockingly, I know.
I think I do too.
For the very fact that this does blur the line between separation of church and state. These are groups, organizations that will eventually rebuild on their own.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's
not
even.
They're not homeowners, like as Nick pointed out. There's not another influx of money in order to pay for this. The $60 billion to finance the recovery efforts are just going to be reallocated. A huge portion of this to rebuild houses of worship.
Yeah, no, to me, it doesn't even get to the level of church and state issues. It's just they don't pay in, they don't get to take out.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's that.
Right.
The thing is, it's not that simple by the way the Supreme Court has done it.
No, I understand, but
Right, like that. I mean, it's
which is wrong.
Right. I mean, I know there's been at least one case where there's a church on fire, and the fire department was like, "Well, you don't pay taxes.
Yeah,
you don't pay for us to come put you out." And the church sued.
It was a very libertarian fire department.
and won. Right. It was like in Gangs of New York. You know, the rival fire companies. You know, who's going to pay more? You know, but in a way, I mean, it does come down to that. I mean, I disagree with this statement, but on the IRS building, chiseled in marble, it says taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society, or something to that effect. And religious institutions do not pay taxes, which to me makes sense because religious institutions do not want a civilized society. They want one dominated by fear and darkness and, you know, all that happy 12th century bullshit.
You don't even have to go down that road to make your argument. They don't pay in.
But I like to.
Yeah. But they don't pay in. The United States government cannot and should not prop up religious institutions in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And rebuilding after a disaster would include that.
Well, that's what all that tithing money is for.
Exactly. They have their own revenue streams, and they're quite successful at it. I hate this entire meme where they need help. This is ridiculous. It's absurd.
Right.
And this is also, by the way, a very heavily Catholic area, Catholic and Jewish area, and both of those religions aren't wanting for money.
Right.
In these areas, by the way. These are rich areas. Now, the residents, that's one thing. They're on their own. They have to deal with the insurance companies. I would make an argument that you shouldn't live on a fucking barrier island, but that's a separate argument.
How does the church not have insurance? Do they just figure they don't need it? Because
who knows?
God? Or...
Who knows? The Vatican can pay for the rebuilding of any Roman Catholic church 100 times over.
Did you see who is? It says here has been pushing particularly hard to get the bill passed.
Yeah, Timothy
fucking Dolan. Yeah, who is Timothy Dolan is who I want to become the next pope because he would just wreck the church.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, it made it.
He would wreck
it
the
made
church. Santorum does the Republican Party.
Yeah, I don't want some liberal guy to be. Yeah, I'm with you there, man. I don't want there to be some liberal modernist pope because that'll just blur the lines of their reality.
More difficult.
See, the Catholic Church is progressive because they're not going to stone you to death for using a condom.
Or simply excommunicate you.
Yeah.
Oh, please, because they did away with being able to request a withdrawal from the church.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
right.
If they just give me some way to get excommunicated, I'd be thrilled.
You're still in the role, right?
Yeah, never filled out the paperwork.
Apparently, it's pretty hard to get excommunicated because
they know they're hemorrhaging members.
I hate to pull this card, but there was only one person in mid 20th century Germany that was excommunicated. And that person was excommunicated because they married a Protestant woman.
Yep.
Not because they were an evil fuck douchebag who killed people. My understanding is that even if you request to be taken off the rolls, they won't take you off the rolls anymore.
Not anymore, no.
The attrition rates are so horrible.
Yeah,
I thought that was the case.
Not since the rape scandal in Ireland broke.
Yeah,
that's when they stopped putting an end to that.
They don't put an end to the rape. They just put an end to taking yourself off the rolls.
Right, yeah.
On the FFRF link there, by the way, gentlemen, you can get yourself a debaptismal certificate.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Which I got.
It makes you feel better.
Yeah, no, I just did it.
Yeah,
I got that, giving them money, and it's like a
yeah,
novelty item for me because it doesn't mean anything to me, really.
It's like getting ordained in Universal Light Church. Everybody's got one.
Do you have that framed and in the dining room there?
No, it's in a folder somewhere.
No, I don't either. I don't even know where I put it.
I mean,
No, but no, I know
Steve,
about it. I mean,
you should frame it, and then you should hang it so that your wife sees it when you're eating dinner.
yeah, she knows it exists.
Oh, does she?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
GM food.
Yes, GM food. This article is talking about potential for GM food breakthroughs. Talking about golden rice, which is a new strain that boosts vitamin A levels, which is important in countries that are having nutrition problems, especially when growing rice is really relatively pretty easy. So if you can imbue easy to grow foods with nutrients that people need, that I have always thought is a good use of GM crops.
Yeah,
right.
Where I have, honestly, this kind of GM crop, I have never had a problem with. The only time I have a problem with it is when somebody patents it and starts charging a farmer because, their crop got crossbred with this strain. That's just bullshit.
Yeah. And there's I think, because the guy who had originally kind of designed this had left and is with a nonprofit that's trying to kind of get this out there. But Monsanto was originally involved, which, Monsanto, for those of you who don't know, is a big bag of dicks.
Yeah.
They are everything that is wrong with GMOs. And they are the main company that provides fuel for the fire for the anti-GM movement.
Right.
They're the ones that have pushed heavily for antibiotics in livestock, which in the U.S., for those of you who don't know, 80% of antibiotics used in the United States are used for livestock. Only 20% is used for human beings.
And we see how well that's going.
Right. And I was listening to NPR recently, and they were talking about there's a new strain that makes MRSA look like the common cold in hospitals and long-term care facilities.
Now, it should be noted that it's not antibiotic use; it's antibiotic misuse that creates superbugs.
Exactly. Well,
it's people not following through with their entire prescription.
Yes. So
you can't take half of your prescription and stop.
Right. They have a 14-day prescription, and after 9 days, they feel fine, and they stop taking it, and then you've left some shit alive.
You have left 2% alive, which generally becomes heinous.
Right.
Maybe not in you.
Well, and the thing about bacteria, and creationists don't want to hear this, bacteria share stuff. Bacteria have sex. Bacteria in every part of your body.
Yeah.
Your body is a bacteria orgy on a scale that the San Bernardino Valley could only hope. Anyway, so we're bringing it back to the GM crops and stuff. There have been issues, with things not being properly vetted. And with things that have been in trials, like especially with animals. Genetically modified animals, much more difficult. They've had much less success with creating genetically modified animals, and the anti-GM crowd has held up, the insert three-eyed fish here type thing, and use that as a case against it. But there definite possibilities. There's definite potential for, food to alleviate so much pain and misery. And the golden rice with, in Southeast Asia, there's a huge problem with vitamin A deficiency. And that's kind of why I focused on rice, because rice is more or less devoid of nutrients. I mean, it's really only half a step away from corn as far as a horrible grain.
Yeah.
I mean, corn is shit. Corn is sugar and a little bit of fiber, and a lot of stuff that you can't digest unless you break it down with lye first, which is not how most people eat it. So,
not knowing, I think, the South eats it in grits, and Mexican food, it's all over the place.
Right.
But
well, I mean, the way
come
that
up in the North very much.
The United States has a corn-based diet.
Yep. Whether you know it or not.
Oh yeah.
High fructose corn syrup. It's fucking
corn starch.
It's in everything.
Yeah.
It's in.
It really is. It's very hard to avoid if you've ever tried. Because I knew a guy who was allergic to corn.
Oh.
It was amazing. We'd get together for a party and whatever, and there would have to be this like all-out search for original Jolt Cola, because it was the only one that at the time that was made with cane sugar that he could drink.
Yeah.
What fucking parties were you having?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah. Anyway, moving on. That 12-sided question.
Yeah, but GM crops like this, I mean, realistically, without GM crops like this, if people keep breeding at the rate they're breeding, we won't be able to feed people.
No.
Well,
I mean, we make enough food now, but we throw so much of it out that people still starve.
Which is a whole other
ball of wax. But products like this could actually, help that problem.
Right.
And
that's always been the hope for GM crops. I would say by the scientific community, not by the
business community.
Right. I mean, the business community, their hope has always been to make a profit. And you've seen that with one of the bad things about GM crops has been that there's a big backlash against this in India, where the companies were genetically modifying crops to have a suicide gene.
Right. Yeah.
So that the
reseed. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's and there are farmers. Those crops that.
Well, but that's just it. Your neighbor gets the crop with the suicide gene, and
right.
Your farm and the bees cross pollinate. And then all of a sudden, you don't have seeds, even though you didn't buy. And then on top of that, Monsanto sues you for using their product without paying for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous.
However, I would say that reading this article and others, but reading this article, and then there's another article referenced in here about the opposition. Like this is a pro. This article is pro.
It is, but the Guardian is typically, I think, a fairly fair.
Well, that's why he links to his colleague, also from the Guardian, who's on the con side.
Right.
But I will say, if you just take it in the context of these two articles, which is hard to do, this one is a little more based on the actual history of it. I don't want to say science of it. And the other one is basically like, we don't trust it. Fuck it.
Right.
I think that people are totally ignorant of how food has evolved, how we have created our food sources over the past several millennia.
Right.
And GMO is
only
not...
6, by the way, only 6 millennia.
Well, of course. GMO is not all that different in some ways from what we've already been doing for a long, long time.
Yeah, right. It's just more focused.
We need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an imperative. Now, we have companies that make it difficult to do this, that are, like, as we were discussing, the issues with Monsanto. But that doesn't mean these are inherently bad or evil, or that they're going to cause some weird, freaky genetic mutation. There's a lot of anti-science in here.
Yeah.
The people don't understand that they're being anti-science. Like, they discuss how Greenpeace is just like flat out against them. Well, there's never been a brain trust over there at Greenpeace anyway.
No.
But
No, there hasn't.
They're just against it because they're against it. There's a lot of that. They're not really looking at the science aspect of it. Now,
well, they're against it because they have that ideology that, nature is best and blah blah blah. But
then don't drink milk from anything other than your mom.
It's fine for them to think that, up to the point where they have to be the one to say, okay, look, nature is best because nature means that this 3 billion people are going to starve.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Arsenic's fucking natural, assholes.
Yeah, exactly.
So the whole fact that nature is good, and
anything altered by humans is bad.
Right.
Is to ridiculous. Not understand what you're already eating.
Right. Because we have been manipulating our food since we have been able to, and that has been at least. I mean, the Green Revolution, the first Green Revolution, goes back to the basis of cities. Yeah. So you're talking pre-10,000. So the idea that modified food, the idea of, I mean, we domesticate that 10,000 years ago, we were domesticating cattle and sheep and goats, and in Asia, chickens and pigs, and barley and wheat. And yes, there have been issues, I think, more recently especially with wheat, because we have bred it. A lot of problems with there. Right, there are a lot of people that are allergic to wheat recently because we basically mutate the fuck out of it. The wheat gluten.
Well, and it's also down to so few strains of any viable genetic material that, should a blight hit, we're kind of fucked.
Well, wheat is fucked.
Yeah, wheat is.
Yeah, which I like wheat. Wheat's delicious.
Wheat's delicious, but you'd be amazed what you can do that simulates wheat with, oats and barley. So.
Yeah, I like barley wine.
Oatmeal can make a pretty tasty bread.
Yeah, yes it can.
Yeah.
And it makes a delicious cookie.
It makes a wonderful cookie.
Oatmeal stout. I was struck by this and many others where I'm sure there are valid concerns about test studies and more political aspects of this, such as the Monsanto patenting of things. But none of these are scientific, medical-based criticisms.
Right.
People are just simply afraid of genetically modified foods. And for no real valid reason. And this is one of those unthinking liberal positions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like acceptance of drones.
Yeah. Well,
but I'm just saying,
because Obama's different than Bush.
There's a party line here, in a sense, where people really aren't thinking about the science or the medical benefits or actual problems. There's no science behind the criticism in many.
They're reacting to the term.
They're reacting to the term, and they're reacting to the company or companies that are producing them. Yes, it's in a handful of companies, but not all of them are trying to basically keep it out of people's hands.
Right. I mean, that's why.
Without profit.
That's why
And you
the
know
one guy
what?
left
That is
left the
irrelevant in a
corporation
sense.
and went to the nonprofit. I mean,
Mhm.
because his idea was bring it to the people, and
Yeah.
Right.
he's trying to get it, authorized and or legitimized in Indonesia and other places in Southeast Asia. I mean, it's this this planet can only do so much.
The carrying capacity is limited,
Yeah.
Right.
to say it nicely. And we may or may not have already exceeded that carrying capacity.
Right.
Only really time will tell. But we already know that we're not doing a very good job of feeding every single person on this planet. We're doing actually a horrible, heinous job of it.
Yes.
And obviously, it's not all the fault of the West, but a lot of it is. And I feel a responsibility to correct that, and this is one way to do so. I'd eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'd have no
Oh
problem
yeah.
with this golden rice stuff.
And
If
down
I
below,
was
the
eating
golden
rice
banana.
right now, which I'm not because I'm trying to lose weight for this stupid thing we're going to run in August.
Well, yeah, I've avoided rice like the plague. It's
Because it's just a carb. It's a big bowl of carb.
all right. Atheist Cop. All right. So, obviously, we
Anyway,
want to talk about Atheist Cop in Puerto Rico. It's not terribly long.
yeah, this is just kind of one of those stories, and the only reason I bring it up is because Puerto Rico is trying to work its way into the Union.
Yeah,
Well, it isn't. It isn't.
Yeah,
they've been doing
I
that
know,
for a long time. There isn't.
It had a slim. Every couple of years they have a vote.
Yeah. Well, this is the first time it got a majority, though, right? I mean,
It's
Right.
rising.
It was a slim majority.
anyway, so what happened in Puerto Rico was a cop in
can't
San
believe-
Juan, a 14-year veteran of the police force in San Juan, is now suing his bosses because he claims that he was reassigned to basically work in the desk because he refused to participate in compulsory Christian prayer.
And wash vehicles.
Worse than death duty.
Oh,
Washing
yeah,
vehicles
washing
and
vehicles.
basically being a courier.
Yeah.
I mean, what's there
That
to
was
say?
not
His
Spanish
superiors
vehicle.
are assholes. This is an egregious violation. I mean, it just is.
Well, assuming, what he says happened, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically saying that he got singled out and basically made to feel ridiculously other.
Well, and Puerto Rico has a very strong conservative religious population.
And that's fine.
Right, but
But-
I mean, it's one of the things that the right wing has said that the left, the progressives, they want Puerto Rico to become a state so that they'll get more votes. Well, that is not the case at all.
No.
Yeah, it's not. That's not a given.
Puerto Rico has a very decently sized Republican representation.
Anyway, the point here is this kind of thing happening in Puerto Rico, which is, a U.S. territory. It's not terribly unexpected for what it is, but it's still something that needs to be kept in check. And honestly, if you saw this story coming from, Texas or Louisiana, would you be terribly surprised either?
No.
Not really. I think somewhere like that, especially for, Puerto Rico's in that weird space where it's part of the United States, but it's not.
But it is still bound by the Constitution.
Yeah, but they don't get to vote. It does seem a little unfair. Well, I mean, they get to vote, but
they don't have to pay taxes.
Well, they're congressperson. They have a senator, but the senator doesn't get to vote, which
It's
makes
not
you wonder,
right.
what's the point of having the senator at that point?
Right.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. As always, please direct questions, comments, etc. to the email account, lefthemispheres@gmail.com. You can also find us Facebook, Twitter, etc. You know the routine. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please go rate and like the show. And if you're not listening on iTunes, then you must have gotten the RSS feed from that one time we told the guy on the comments section on the webpage. And thanks. Enjoy. But tell your friends that you think we're cool. Or
And thanks to listener/reader Stephen, I don't want to say his full name, who shot us the entire Jim Al-Khalili article for the first time in this is episode 15.
Right.
I've been asking people, hey, what do you want us to talk about? And someone finally responded. So that's
Thank
what
you.
that is.
I really appreciate
thank you
it.
very much, actually. More of that.
Yes.
Yes.
More.
Talk to us.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Or good day.
Bye.